So it's a beautiful 107-degree afternoon here in southern Nevada. We're about to hit the California border, and we are heading out from Las Vegas down to Southern California. We spent about 24 hours in Vegas taking care of some business after flying in from the Midwest, and now we're going to be making a brief pit stop in Ontario in a couple hours, and then we should be in San Diego for maybe a week or so. And we're making the same drive we have made many times down I-15. It's a very, very pretty drive if you hadn't made it before. Especially if you come all the way across the country through Colorado on the Rocky Mountains, on I-70, through Utah, southern Utah. Absolutely beautiful. And then jump on I-15 down through southwestern Utah, the very northwestern corner of Arizona, where they have the Virgin River Gorge, and then down into the Las Vegas area, and now into California. Exceptionally pretty. It's a little bit warm this time of year, though. And when we got off the plane and left the airport yesterday around 3 p.m., yeah, I felt like we were stepping into a furnace. But what you realize after a while is that you can get used to anything. And, you know, we live where it's miserable and gloomy for 9 months out of the year, and you can't hardly go outside.
In half a mile, keep left to stay on I-15 south.
Because it's too cold to be outside, and then you get 90 days of nice weather in the summer. Well, here it's the opposite. It's too hot to be outside for, you know, about half the year, and then you get about 90 days of nice weather in the late fall, early spring, that type of thing.
Keep left to stay on I-15 south.
It's all good. You can get used to anything. We're passing through Primm, which is the
Continue on I-15 south for 149 miles.
very last place you can do any real gambling before you cross over into Southern California and the Mojave Desert. And there's a couple hundred miles of nothing before you get down to San Bernardino area and LA area, and then down all the way down to San Diego. So it's just kind of funny that they put it right there on the border. Off on the right, you can't really hardly see them.
Welcome to California.
But there are gigantic solar power electric generators. And it's not solar panels, it's mirrors that reflect the sun up into these giant towers and make them super hot, and then I guess they run a steam turbine off of them. But the purpose of the video today is to discuss really the three options you have if you want an electrified pickup truck. And you know, the three options for which we have any solid information. And they are the F-150 Power Boost Hybrid, which we're driving right now, the F-150 Lightning full electric pickup truck, which was just announced a couple weeks ago, and which a couple of folks have driven since then and given their thoughts about. And then the third is the Tesla Cybertruck, which was announced, I don't know, a year ago or even longer. And it's gonna be in production basically whenever they can get their factory up and running in the Austin, Texas area. Ford is also announcing, well, they're calling it a 2022, so who knows when they'll start to ship it. First, they have to start getting semiconductors, computer chips, back into production or back into their hands so they can finish the trucks they're making now. There's that power station again. They got thousands and thousands of F-150s and Super Duties sitting in parking lots. And they're fully assembled except for the fact that they are missing semiconductors. So they can't ship them. And in some cases it's, you know, the computer, the ECU that runs the engine, or the TCU for the transmission, or who knows, maybe it's to run the electronics and the entertainment system. There's a large number of possibilities, but the bottom line is that they can't ship them because they're not complete. GM, I know, has been shipping some trucks that are missing certain features because they have everything but, they've got the chips to run the engine and transmission, but they don't have the chips to run the, who knows, the entertainment system. But in any case, those are your three choices. The PowerBoost Hybrid, which we're driving today, the Lightning, the F-150 Lightning electric pickup, fully electric, and the Tesla Cybertruck. There's also a couple others, the Rivian, but we don't really have much information about them. And so they're not really a known quantity. But before you think about those three as your only choices, I would suggest, do you even need to buy one of those vehicles at all? Would you be better off just buying a plain old gasoline or even diesel-powered pickup truck, of which there are a number of options? The new Silverado, Duramax 3-liter, or Baby Max as some people call it, that's gotten a lot of good reviews. There are also some trouble areas, like with that belt-driven oil pump way in the back of the engine that you have to drop the transmission in order to replace. And obviously the Silverado has its own issues. But there's also the F-150 with the 3-liter diesel, the so-called Power Stroke 3-liter. And that is a great truck. And that is something you should consider, along with the 3 electrified models. And you might also ask yourself, do I need a new pickup truck at all? Maybe a 5-year-old F-150, maybe a 2018, which is the last time they refreshed it before this year, would do you just fine. Or maybe even a 2015, which was the last time they completely redid the body and frame. That's when they shifted to aluminum for the body, which is great if you live in a place like the Midwest where we live, or anywhere in the Rust Belt, because that means your truck isn't going to basically fall apart after 5 or 10 years of salt and snow getting sprayed up onto the underbody, the rockers, fenders. And so what I would suggest for a lot of people is that you don't really need a new truck, and you definitely don't need an electrified pickup truck. Maybe all you need is a 6-year-old, like a 2015 F-150, or even a 10-year-old pickup truck, or even a 15-year-old pickup truck. And bear with me. I'll play devil's advocate here. We got this truck, which is obviously brand new, but we also have a 10-year-old Duramax 3500, which we got with 350,000 miles on it. Hang on just a moment. Just got through the agricultural inspection station. Yeah, we got a Duramax 3500 from 2011. It's got the 6.6 liter LML series Duramax, which actually was introduced that year. Runs like a champ. It pulls our 48-foot trailer, gooseneck, aluminum enclosed, which we have used to haul cars before, but we also use it to haul palletized freight, and we could fit 20 pallets of freight on it. Call it about 10,000 pounds of freight, plus the weight of the trailer, plus the weight of the truck. We've had it loaded up to 26,000 pounds before. Absolutely no issues. It got up and down the Appalachian Mountains on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, back and forth to New Cumberland, DLA, New Cumberland, with no trouble whatsoever. Complete confidence. It's got the diesel exhaust brake, which they introduced that year, which helps you get down those steep mountain slopes without having to ride the brakes, and it gives you huge amounts of confidence when you're towing a heavy trailer. And so we got that one just recently, and we looked at all the newer ones. But to us, there was absolutely no reason to spend 75, 80, 90,000 bucks on a new Super Duty or a new Duramax or a new Cummins when you could get a 10-year-old truck that does everything you need and it has all the features you need. It doesn't have the newest and most exciting infotainment system like this one does, but you can live without a 12-inch screen, believe it or not. And your CarPlay, you can actually live without that. And so a lot of people think they have to have the newest and best truck. And you know what? You really don't. You really, really don't. There is so much goodness in any truck made after, let's just say, the year 2000. And definitely 05 or maybe 2010. That there is no reason whatsoever to have to buy a new truck. And in fact, the only reason we chose this one, the only reason we bought this one, which was the first new vehicle we bought in more than 30 years of driving. It was really two reasons. And the first is because we wanted the high output Pro Power on board. And Pro Power on board was just introduced for 2021. That is your onboard AC power generation system, which in the hybrid can put out either 2.4 kilowatts or it can put out 7.2 kilowatts. If you step up and buy the high output version, which we did. And so it'll give you AC outlets in your dashboard, in the console for the back seats, the center console for the back seats, and then it'll give you, one in the front, one in the back seat, and then 4 120 outlets in the bed of the truck. And then it'll also give you a 240 outlet in the bed of the truck, which again can generate up to 20 amps of 240 AC power, which is 7.2 kilowatts. And that's something that we wanted. For people who don't need that much, you can just get the regular Pro Power on board, which I think is standard with the hybrid, and that is 2.4 kilowatts, which is 20 amps of 120 AC power. And that's probably going to be enough for most people. Or if you don't want the hybrid, in the 2021 F-150 with either the 5-liter V8 or the 2.7-liter EcoBoost or the 3.5-liter EcoBoost, you can get a 2.0 kilowatt output Pro Power on board system, but that only runs when the engine is on. And the hybrid, it'll run even when the engine's off because it's got the hybrid battery. And so we wanted that. We also wanted a truck that would drive itself in certain circumstances. And this truck has what's called lane keeping and lane centering, as well as adaptive cruise control. And that's roughly equivalent to the first version of Tesla Autopilot, or AP1, which came out, I think, in 2015. And after driving a Tesla for 50,000 miles and experiencing Autopilot, it is life-changing in terms of the amount of driving comfort and safety that it gives you. Apparently the 3 safest cars on the planet today are the Tesla S with Autopilot engaged, the Tesla Model 3 with Autopilot engaged, and I think the Tesla Model X with Autopilot engaged. And then I think the 3 safest cars after that are 3 other Teslas without the Autopilot engaged. And so it doesn't just provide a lot of comfort and take a lot of mental workload off of your off your plate. It also makes you a safer driver. It reduces your fatigue, your stress level, and it can react a lot faster to sudden changes and accidents than a normal driver can. And there are a bunch of videos of Teslas, especially with the newer version, the Autopilot version 2 or 2.5, because of the fact that it can see not just the cars to your left and right, but the cars ahead of you, and not just the car immediately ahead of you, but it can see 2 and 3 ahead of you. And so if there's an accident and the car 3 vehicles ahead of you wipes out, the cameras in the autopilot system will detect it and will act on it much faster, but before you even know what's happening. The car is doing an emergency braking action or an emergency lane change. Completely automatically and without any intervention from the driver. So in terms of its ability to keep you out of trouble, autopilot is life-changing. And so Ford's version of that, as you can see there, there's that, it's got that blue halo around the picture of the vehicle on the dashboard. That blue halo, there's a little one ahead of you, and that one means you've got adaptive cruise control. And then there's a bigger one that shows itself as being around you to your front, left, and right. And that is lane keeping and lane centering. And again, it's roughly equivalent to Tesla Autopilot version 1. And it does I'm not going to say a fantastic job, but it's good enough in terms of, you know, letting you do an 800-mile day, which I think is the most we've ever driven in this truck in one day, in complete comfort and basically eliminates that fatigue and that exhaustion that you feel after at the end of a long day of driving. So because of the amount of driving we do, which is about 50,000 miles a year, and because we knew we were gonna do a lot of driving with whatever truck we bought in and around the Southwest, which, you know, it'll have a 5 or 6 or 8 hour drive as kind of routine because of the distances you're covering in the Southwest. We wanted a truck that would essentially drive itself. We don't care for what they call Blue Cruise, which lets you drive hands-free, and which will be rolling out as an over-the-air update sometime, I think in July, they said. We don't have a need for that because we don't really have any need to drive with our hands off the wheel. It's nothing we've sat around thinking, God, I wish I could take my hands off the wheel. As it is right now, what you see is the truck is driving itself. All that movement in the steering wheel, that's the truck doing it. And we're just kind of holding on just so that if it does something stupid, we can take over in an instant. But no, we're not going to pay extra for Blue Cruise just for the privilege of keeping our hands on our lap and making it harder to grab the wheel and react and take over if need be, if the truck does something stupid and winds up, you know, sending you off the road. But again, the reason we bought a new truck, as stated, is because of Ford's version of autopilot, which is basically lane centering, lane keeping, and adaptive cruise control, coupled with the fact that this F-150 has Pro Power onboard AC generation, which we've got a lot of plans for, and that's why we bought it. But for most people, you don't need a brand new pickup truck. So, you know, a lot of people have a lot of money burning a hole in their pocket after an entire year of sitting at home and not commuting and not really going out and, you know, taking vacations and things. And what I would suggest is you don't have to blow all your money on a brand new pickup truck. If a 5 or 10-year-old pickup truck can give you everything you actually need, and for most people, you really can get everything you need out of a used pickup truck. You know, they hold their value. They, in terms of reliability and longevity, yeah, a 5-year-old pickup truck is going to be just fine, especially if it's an F-150 built after 2015 or starting in 2015 with the aluminum body that isn't going to rust. So that's our first thought on it. Now, in terms of the two electrified, fully electric options, the F-150 Lightning and the Tesla Cybertruck, we don't really have a desire for either one of them. specifically because of the range, the issue of range. And so the Cybertruck has a claimed, I think, a maximum range of somewhere over 500 miles. But if you haven't owned an electric vehicle before, or learned or read much about them, keep in mind that the 500 miles will take you from 100% down to 0%. However, you're not going to be doing that. You're going to be spending the majority of your time in between 20 and 80%. And that's because if you fully discharge your battery all the way down to 0 and then fully charge it all the way back up to 100 on a routine basis, you will kill the battery. And so in terms of longevity, no, you're not going to be using that full 500 plus mile range. You're going to be using the middle 60%, which is from 20 all the way down to 80. Man, what the hell's going on here? Somebody's flatbedding a Tesla. I guess that's one way to get rid of your range anxiety. But again, keep in mind, you know, you hear trucks advertising a 500 mile range, or vehicles, and no, you're not going to be driving 500 miles on a daily basis and then stopping and recharging back to 100%. You're going to be driving between the 80% level and the 20% level. So get that 500 mile number out of your head and think about 60% of 500 miles, which is 300. Okay, and that's what I would call your practical or maximum useful range, starting at 80% and going down to 20%. And so you'd say, well, 300 miles, that's 4 hours of driving. That should be enough for most people. And yeah, it might be enough for most people, but we drive way more than 300 miles in a day on a great many days. Today we were driving in and around Vegas for about the first 4 or 5 hours of the day, 6 or 7 hours of the day actually, from about 8 in the morning until 3 p.m. And now we're getting on the road for a 250 mile drive to Southern California. And then we're going to be doing a lot of driving around once we get there this evening. Okay? So we might put in about a 400 or 450 mile day. And so yeah, we use well over 300 miles on a routine basis. And then keep in mind the fact that if you are towing a trailer, your range is going to be cut at least in half, if not more so, because of the massive impact that a trailer has on the aerodynamics of the vehicle that's towing it. There's a video that if you're subscribed to TFL Truck, the Fast Lane truck, they took you see how the engine cycles on and off when it's coasting. We've been going down a long downhill stretch for about the past 10 minutes, and so yeah, every now and then the engine cuts out. And it'll coast, and it'll do a combination of electric braking, otherwise known as regen braking, and it'll be powered by electricity, so it's driving under electric power, all completely seamlessly and transparently, and you don't even know what's happening unless you're watching the tachometer. But again, TFL Truck, they took a Tesla Model X, which I think they had as a project car, and they hooked a little camper trailer up to it, very, very low profile camper trailer, and they thought they were going to tow it from like Denver to somewhere in the Portland, Oregon area for a reunion or something like that. And they had to give up because they couldn't get 100 miles down the road. They couldn't get from one Tesla supercharger to the next without having to slow way, way down to like 40 miles an hour, because that little camper trailer was absolutely destroying the aerodynamics of that vehicle. And so it wasn't just doubling the aerodynamic drag, it was, I don't know, tripling it, who knows. And so if you've got a pickup truck and you've got a boat hitched up to it, or more to the point, if you've got a camper trailer hitched up to it and it's an electric pickup truck, you're going to see your range more than cut in half. And we know what Ford has announced. They've announced, I think, 300 miles as the range for the long range option. And some people say, well, it's more like 450. Okay, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's 450 miles. Okay, again, keep in mind that you're using the middle 60% of that range, not the full 100% of it. So 60% of 450 is, I don't know, 250, 260, something like that. And then you about cut it in half because of the fact that you've got a trailer hitched up and it's killing your aerodynamics. So call it 125 miles, or about 62, 65 miles out and 65 miles back at highway speeds. So you can do a round trip, again, about 65 miles out and back before you have to stop and charge that thing for a couple hours. And that's just not going to work for us. There are a lot of people it could work for, all right, but definitely not for us. And you know, we don't mean to, you know, constantly badmouth it and trash talk it. But the Achilles heel of any electric vehicle is range, and for an electric car, that might be fine because you're typically not going to be doing a lot of towing with a car. And so a Tesla with a 500-mile range, a Tesla automobile, you know, we would look at that a lot more favorably than we would a pickup truck because, okay, the Tesla, you know, the new Model S coming out this year, the Plaid Model S has, I think, a 520-mile range. Again, use the 60% factor to figure useful range. That's just over 300, and that means you start at 80%, drive 300 miles, and then you find a Tesla charger, a Tesla supercharger, plug it in and charge for around 45 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And so the fraction of time that you spend charging versus driving, if you drive, again, 4 hours at 75 miles an hour, that's 300 miles. Stop and charge for a half hour or 45 minutes. So what does that add to your drive time? If it's a half hour, that adds 15-20%. If it's 45 minutes, that adds, you know, again, about 20% to your drive time. We could probably live with a vehicle that made you charge for about 30 or 40 minutes for every 4 hours of driving. Especially, you know, people like us who are middle-aged, we need to take a lot of pit stops anyhow. So that's just fine. So watch what's happening now. We are coming to a crest here, and we're going to go downhill for about the next 15 miles into Baker, California. So we're going to reset the MPGs. Okay. It's about a 5 to 7% downhill grade for 17 miles down into Baker, California, and the entrance to Death Valley. And it's just kind of neat to see how this truck handles it because, you know, for the most part, when you're going downhill, it really all depends on how steep the grade is. We took this thing down what's called the Ike Gauntlet, what a lot of people call the Ike Gauntlet in Colorado. You come out of the Eisenhower Tunnel, you're at 11,000 feet, and you basically go straight down for about 15 miles, down about a 7% grade. A lot steeper than what we're going down now. And what happened in this truck is that the engine switched off. We set the cruise at 65, and the engine switched off, and it did electric braking for about the first 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And then it had to stop doing electric braking because the battery was basically full. And so at that point, it switched on the engine, and it went to conventional engine braking at somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 RPM. And it did that for the entire rest of the downhill, all the way down to wherever it is that you stop. And so this time, it's not enough of a downhill to let the truck switch the engine off. We got enough aerodynamic drag, enough wind resistance to where, yeah, it needs the engine to stay on in order to hold the speed that we've set, which is 72 on the cruise. Now, if we slow it down to match whatever these 18-wheelers are doing, which is, I don't know, in the 60s. So now it's coasting with the engine off. And look at our fuel economy now. $75, $77, $78. Let's speed up a little bit. The green number, where it says 68, that is the speed that you have set on the cruise. And then the big white number, that's your actual speed. And then it's got a speed limit sign. And so it's kind of neat. You know, on certain sections of highway, the vehicle will just basically coast with the engine off. And it's either recharging the battery, which we suspect it is now, or it's using the battery to provide electricity to the motor to drive the engine. And so now we've got it set at 70, and it's still going 100% electric. So that's kind of a neat trick that it'll do. But you know, people have mentioned in some of the comments on some other videos, who really gives a damn about MPG? That's not why you buy a truck, okay? And it is a true statement. You don't buy a truck to save gas. But if your truck will save you a lot of gas, that's not a bad thing either. Or it'll give you the capability of just coasting downhill with the engine off, and either doing electric braking or actual electric driving. You know, that's kind of a neat trick. But again, that's not why we bought this truck. We couldn't care less about fuel economy in terms of a major factor in our lives. You know, we will tow trailers cross country and get gas mileage in the single digits, and it just doesn't matter. You know, we got other priorities in life. But again, in the course of accomplishing other things, if the vehicle will save you a lot of gas, okay, that's great. We got no problem saving money. Anyway, you know, we've driven our Tesla, our Model S, across country. We went all the way from Michigan to Las Vegas and back about a year ago, back during the pandemic. And you know, the autopilot was great. We did a 1,000-mile day, and autopilot was pretty much the only reason we were able to do a 1,000-mile day. We went all the way from western Nebraska to southeast Michigan. And it was a little bit painful, but we got through it, largely because of autopilot. And again, if that car would go farther between charging stops, we would really, really appreciate it. That car is 5 years old. It's only got the 85 kilowatt hour battery. The newer ones are up to 100, or maybe even a little bit over 100. And they got a lot better technology in terms of the motors, which are more efficient, and they've made little tweaks to the aerodynamics. So yeah, the newest and most advanced Model S, which is going to be coming out any day now, Tesla promises us, has about a 500-mile range. And we wouldn't mind a car like that at all. You drive 300 miles and then you get to stop for about a half hour to charge. That's fine. We could even drive cross country and be perfectly comfortable with a car like that. But again, with a pickup truck, and we don't mean to, you know, again, we are not trying to trash talk the electric F-150. We know what Ford is doing. They're trying to they're trying to predict the future and trying to sort of experiment and see what works and see what people will buy. It could be that this will be a runaway bestseller because the average pickup truck buyer will realize, or will admit to themselves, They don't actually need something that can drive all day and night and tow a big heavy trailer across the country. If all they ever do is just commute back and forth to the office on weekdays, and then on the weekends they go back and forth to Home Depot or Costco or Lowe's, or maybe the boat ramp, and maybe it's only 30 miles away back and forth to the boat ramp, or they go to the campsite for a couple weeks during the summer with their family, and it's not too far of a drive to get to it, and they can plug in the vehicle at the campsite. Okay, well, in a case like that, that might be just fine, and Ford might find a whole lot of people who are willing to spend the very large amount of money that it's going to cost you to get into one of those with the options that you want. It's not going to be 30 to 40K. We think it's going to be at least 50 or 60 or 70. Our guess earlier was 70,000. And so for us, it's just not going to work. And even for people whose lifestyle it'll fit, you still have to ask yourself, do you actually need a new truck? Or can you save all that interest and save all that money and just buy a 5-year-old used pickup truck, which is our suggestion. So anyway, a lot to think about. We'll find out more as this thing gets closer to production, and we'll go from there. We do not claim to be smarter than Ford when it comes to marketing and it comes to understanding the buying habits and the driving habits and the lifestyle habits of the average truck buyer. Ford is absolutely brilliant at marketing. We talked about it before. If you remember back to the 80s, the best-selling vehicle for a large portion of the 80s was the Ford Escort. And that was an absolute piece of junk. But Ford knew how to sell it. And then I guess during the late 80s, the best-selling car in the country was the Ford Taurus. And that was a pretty average sedan. But Ford knew how to sell it. And it was a brilliant achievement. The Ford Taurus, that was a radical design change. The ergonomics were very, very different. It was very European. It was basically almost a carbon copy of the Audi 5000, if you remember that car. And how Ford was able to get that car sold to millions of middle American automobile customers, in the heartland. Very, very impressive. The Cybertruck, it's the same reason, the same issue we have with the electric F-150. Tesla in general has the best battery technology with the best battery life, and they got the best electric motor technology in terms of how efficient the motors are, and they're constantly improving it. And generally speaking, they have the best aerodynamics. Not sure how the Cybertruck is going to stack up, but we think on paper it's probably going to be a little bit better than the electric F-150. Just as the Tesla Model Y is a little bit better in most measurements than the Mustang Mach-E. And so on paper and in terms of the technology and in terms of the way it drives, we would expect that the Cybertruck will be a little bit better in most respects than the electric F-150, the Lightning. But that's not going to make the difference in who's going to buy it. People who want a truck that looks like the Cybertruck will buy it. And people who don't like the way it looks will buy the F-150 Lightning. That's how that's going to work. But again, in terms of what we do, which is a lot of driving over long, long distances on the highway, half the time pulling a trailer, neither one of those is going to work for us. And so, at least for now, we're going to stick with this one, the hybrid. It gets, 600 miles off a tank, 500 miles off a fuel tank. It'll tow a trailer all day up and down the mountains. And that's what we need. We need a truck that'll actually work all day and not just for a couple hours a day. The drive we're making right now from Las Vegas down to Southern California, the electric F-150, the Lightning, would have a very hard time making this drive. Because again, it's about 250 miles plus the 50 or so that we spent driving around in Las Vegas earlier today, and about another 25, 30, 40 that we're going to be spending driving around in Southern California after we get to the San Diego area. And so the Lightning with a max range of 300, which is a practical range. Again, what's 0.6 of 300? 180. No, it's not going to make the Vegas to LA drive or Vegas to San Diego drive. Absolutely not. It's going to get maybe halfway there, and then it's going to have to stop and charge for 30, 40, 50 minutes. And that electricity is not free, by the way. So the temp is up to 112 now. Which you'd expect because we're down in the valley, down in the low ground, and we're in Death Valley, at the entrance to Death Valley. Baker, which we're about to pull into here, has it's one of its claims to fame is it's got the largest thermometer. Basically, you stop there to top off your gas and keep going. There's no other reason to stop at Baker. I don't even think it has a hotel. So one more issue, and then we'll end it, that some people have raised is, well, I like the fact that an electric truck is going to be more reliable than a gasoline engine truck or a truck with an engine. And here's why you shouldn't think about that, or you shouldn't consider that. Okay, we've got a Tesla. It's 5 years old. It has needed more maintenance in the 50,000 miles we've owned it. And it's at, I think its mileage right now is at 79,000. That Tesla has needed more maintenance than our Honda Pilot, which is 15 years old, 3 times the age, and it has at least double the miles, probably more like 3 times the miles. And so, yeah, you don't have an engine, and so you're not going to be changing the timing belt or the timing chain. You're not going to be dealing with the cam phasers that a lot of 3.5s have that die on them. You're not going to have a water pump fail on you. You're not going to have turbos to replace. You're not going to have a fan clutch. You're not going to have, all that stuff that goes wrong on a conventional gasoline engine or diesel engine. You're not going to have to replace injectors, fuel pumps, fuel tanks, fuel filters, oil and filter changes, clutches, transmissions, none of that stuff. On an electric vehicle, you have a motor in the front and a motor in the back and maybe a final drive, and then half shafts, from the final drive or differential, and then hubs, and that's it. That is basically it. You might have some reduction gearing, that type of thing, but there are probably a dozen moving parts. There are no reciprocating parts, meaning parts that go back and forth. So everything on an electric vehicle, more or less, is a rotating part. And so theoretically, yeah, the reliability should be a lot better. But real world, again, in that Tesla, we've had to replace the front drive unit, which is the equivalent of replacing an engine and transmission in a conventional automobile. We've had to replace the center screen, which controls basically everything that is not the drivetrain, twice now. All of it's under warranty. We haven't had to pay hardly a dime for non-warranty repairs. But when the warranty runs out, we don't want to have a Tesla that is not under warranty. And who knows how reliable the Ford is going to be. Again, so you don't have an engine and a transmission. And so all that stuff that can go wrong in your engine and transmission is out of the picture. But you still have batteries, you still have the cooling system for your batteries. And batteries don't last forever. And you have the front and the rear drive units. And as we found out with our Tesla. No, those don't last forever either. And then you got the entire rest of the vehicle. Ignore all that junk that's on our seat. And so, you know, to us, it's not a major factor in the decision to own a vehicle, whether or not it has an electric drivetrain versus a conventional, internal combustion engine powertrain. A well done internal combustion engine will last you the entire life of the vehicle. Our Dodge with the Cummins is pushing 400,000 miles, and it will easily last double that long, as long as we don't crash it, or as long as it doesn't have some kind of catastrophic failure. So the long and the short of it, when you look at the requirements we have, which are, not typical, but also not too far out of the ordinary, we need a truck that will drive all day, and we don't really have a lot of time to stop and waste charging something with a gigantic battery, which is what an electric pickup truck is going to require. On that F-150, there is a rumor that the long range has something like 150 to 175 kilowatt hour battery. So almost double the size of the largest Tesla automobile battery. That will take a long time to charge. And again, it's not free. So do you value your time? Hopefully you do. And if you do, then you need to keep that in mind. The perfect vehicle in our mind is something like this, but with a much bigger hybrid battery. This one has a 1.5 kilowatt hour hybrid battery. It would be 1,000 times better if it had about a 15 kilowatt hour hybrid battery. And maybe a stronger rear axle so it could support the weight of the battery, as well as all the payload you need to carry, and the tongue weight or the pin weight of a nice big heavy trailer. And so that to us is the ideal truck. Something like this, which is a hybrid, which will never, which has a battery that will never die because it can always recharge itself, but with a slightly bigger battery so it can do a little bit more electric driving than it currently does, which is not a hell of a lot. And let's hope that Ford keeps moving in that direction and doesn't just jump on the bandwagon and try to get rid of internal combustion engines altogether. Because for people who need a truck, at least for the foreseeable future, the next at least probably 4 or 5 years, until they make a 1,000-mile electric vehicle battery, you're going to need a truck with an internal combustion engine. All right, well, I think that's about enough for now. Hope everyone's having a great day, and we will talk to you later.